All right. Folks, this is it. It is great to see everybody. Let's do this. Let's keep the background nice and quiet. If at any point you wish to ask a question, make a comment, please jump right in. Daily Power Parsha. Okay. All right, so let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. We have so many really cool things to talk about today. Actually, in our Torah portion, the topic is holidays. Who doesn't love a good holiday, right? Holidays are fantastic. So we're going to explore the Jewish holidays, and we're going to explore the Jewish holidays and learn some lessons from them. Some holidays that we're very familiar with, some that maybe are a little bit less well known. We're going to explore them and draw some life lessons. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Let's get into the Torah reading. Let's see. Here we go. Let me share this. Okay, tell me if you see what I'm seeing. Torah reading for Emor. You guys see that? All right, awesome, fantastic. Okay, Torah reading for Emor. This is Leviticus chapter 23. This is for day number 4, or the 4th reading, which is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is just for us, hand selected. Okay, so the section opens with a discussion about the holidays. So God speaks to Moses, and this is what God says. Tell the children of Israel the following. The Lord's appointed holy days that you shall designate as holy occasions, these are my appointed holy days. In other words, God is saying, here are the holidays. Holidays are not just called. I studied for a year in yeshiva. I studied in yeshiva for 1 year in London, and I remember how one time we were having a fabrengen, which is like a Hasidic gathering, and Rabbi Gordon, who was one of the teachers there, so he was fabrengen. He was speaking about the difference between what we call it in America and what they call it in England. A vacation versus a holiday. You know, right? You have vacation time in America. In England, it's holiday. Going on holiday. He says, what's the difference? Vacation means you're vacating. You're leaving. Right? Your values, your morals, your ethics, you're leaving it. You're taking a break. What is a holiday? It's a holy day. It's a totally different experience. So don't go on vacation, go on holiday. He was like promoting the English version of it. All right. But if you notice here, as the Torah introduces the holidays, the Torah calls them as days that are designated as holy occasions. They're not vacation days. They are holy occasions. They are very special moments in time that are holy. Again, not just because we're not working, not just because we're with family, they are spiritually energized. Take a look at the next verse, verse number 3, because this should surprise you. After this preamble, after this introduction regarding the holidays, look at what the next thing the Torah talks about. For 6 days, work may be performed, but on the 7th day, it is a complete day of rest, a holy occasion. Once again, holy occasion. You shall not perform any work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwelling places. And here the Torah talks about the Sabbath, Shabbat, which is very interesting. Because when you think of a holiday, you think of Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shavuot, Sukkot, right? I'm going out of chronological order here, but bear with me. Where we think of the traditional holidays as being holidays. So why is Shabbat? Right after the introduction, here are your holidays. Oh, but first a message from our sponsor. Don't forget about Shabbat. How is Shabbat in the conversation with holidays? In fact, and then it talks about Passover. Verse 5 is Passover. We talk about we talk about other reaping the harvest of the land. Actually, no, sorry. We talk about Sfira to Omer, the counting of the Omer. Count for yourselves the wave offering. In other words, here from verse 5. Verse 5 is where we really begin the discussion about the holidays. The question is, why after the introduction of holidays in verse 3, verse 2, why in verse 3 does it suddenly mention Shabbat in a conversation about holidays? Shabbat seems to be different than a holiday. And of course, one of the answers is, the Torah is telling us that we have a weekly holiday. Don't look at Shabbat as anything other than a weekly holiday. Just like we look forward to holidays, right? Passover is coming up, Rosh Hashanah is coming up, Sukkot's coming up, Shavuot's coming up. It's a holiday, it's a big deal. We should have the same perspective about Shabbat. It's a weekly holiday. It's a weekly opportunity to enjoy, to relax, to celebrate, to be present. And it's an amazing gift. You know, there's a famous statement in the Talmud or in our sages. Our sages tell us, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. What does it mean? It means that we think, we're keeping Shabbat. Shabbat keeps us sane. Shabbat keeps us healthy. Shabbat keeps us grounded. Shabbat keeps us in a good place. Why? Because it's good to take a day off. We had a course recently called Judaism's Gifts to the World, and one of the classes was on the gift of rest, the gift of Shabbat. The ancient world looked down upon rest. Rest, laziness, right? Today we appreciate rest, but back in the day, rest was looked down upon, looked at with disdain. The ancient Romans, the Greek philosophers would say, those Jews, you know why they have Shabbat? Lazy. Now we know that you're optimized specifically when you're able to take a break, to gain some perspective, to rest a little bit. That actually enables more productivity and, of course, allows us to engage in spiritual pursuits as opposed to chasing the physical stuff that we typically chase during the week. Okay, so again, my first point, the first message I wanted to share with you is, what is Shabbat? It's the Sabbath, but you know what it also is? According to the Torah, it's also a holiday. In the conversation of holidays, Shabbat is the first one mentioned, which means Shabbat is a Yom Tov. It's also a holiday. It's a very special day. Okay, now let's look at the holidays that Torah talks about. It talks about Passover, and of course we know what Passover is. But then after Passover, it talks about the Omer offering, which I alluded to before, and let's jump into now. Verse number 10. So it says, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land which I am giving you, in other words, when you go into the land of Israel, and you reap its harvest, you shall bring to the Kohen an Omer of the beginning of your reaping. In other words, when the field first starts to grow, when does it start to grow? Springtime, this time of year. Okay, so when the harvest first comes up, or when the grain first comes up, and you have your first harvest, you need to bring an Omer amount of that first grain to the Kohen, to the temple. Now, if you're wondering what amount is an Omer offering, and how big is that? So an Omer is 2.5 liters or 5 1/4 U.S. pints. In case you're wondering, that's how much it is. 2.5 liters or 5 1/4 pints. That's the measurement of the Omer. That's the amount of grain that you bring, that was brought in ancient times in the temple in the land of Israel when the first harvest came up. Now the Omer offering was actually brought of barley. They brought the first barley. Okay, that was what they brought. Fields produce many things. Specifically, they brought barley. Now, what do you do with the barley offering that you have? Verse 11, the Torah continues, and he shall wave the Omer, the Kohen, shall wave the Omer. Typically, it was waved like up and down, side to side, whatever, before the Lord, so that it will be acceptable for you. The Kohen shall wave it on the day after the rest day. That means the day after the first day of Passover. And on the day of the waving of your Omer, you shall offer up an umbel mishlam, first year as a burnt offering, and you bring a meal offering. In verse 13 it's discussed, with a libation of an amount of wine. Okay, fine. Here's the interesting thing. Take a look at this. Take a look at verse 14. What's the significance of this offering? The Torah says, "You shall not eat bread or flour made from parched grain or fresh grain until this very day, until you bring your God sacrifice. This is an eternal statute throughout your generations and all your dwelling places," which means that before the Omer offering is brought, you cannot use the new harvest. Are you with me on this? When they harvested the fields, the Jews were not allowed to use any of the harvest until the second day of Passover, when they would bring an Omer offering of the barley. That triggered the ability now to use the grains from the field. If they wanted to make bread, they had to use flour made from the previous year's harvest. They had to have the wheat and the flour and put it in, keep it fresh, and that's what they could use until such time as the second day of Passover, when they brought the Omer offering, and then it was green-lighted, the new harvest was green-lighted. And of course the message is, before we get to enjoy, we have to offer thanks. We have to acknowledge where it's coming from. The fields, the food, it all is a blessing from God. You can be the wisest individual and have the most clever plan, and your entire harvest could get wiped out. Maybe there's a drought, God forbid. Maybe there's a locust infestation. I was reading recently, there's some sort of massive, do you guys see this? Like a massive locust infestation, which is like, it's incredibly vicious, not dangerous to humans, but dangerous to the crops. I think it's somewhere in Africa it's going on right now, where you have like billions, literally like billions of these locusts that descend, and within hours, like when they descend, they kind of move around. When they descend on an area, like a few acres or a few miles, in a few hours, everything is gone. Like there's no food left. So my point is, look, there's so many things that could happen in life that could wipe out our food supplies. Yeah, you're a good farmer, you're smart, you're clever, you have the latest technology, drip irrigation, you got it all figured out. Guess what? Nature's nature, and stuff can happen. Droughts, floods, famines, who knows? Locusts, oh my, right? Anything could happen. Before we enjoy the New Year's harvest in the spring, we bring the offering and we thank God for our blessings. And we appreciate the fact that we have the food that we eat. And that triggers the ability to use it. Now, we find ourselves in this time period, right? We find ourselves in the time period following Passover. And verse 15 tells us what is the nature of this time period, which you may already know. Take a look. "And you shall count for yourselves." Look at this. You should count from the morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the Omer's away of offering. In other words, from the day after the first day of Passover. The rest day here is referring to the first day of Passover, when we abstain from work. So the day after, from the second day of Passover, from when you bring the Omer as a wave offering, you should count what? 7 weeks. I know it's a little bit clunky in the translation. The sentence, we could rewrite it to be a little bit easier to read, but you shall count for yourselves, starting from when? From the second day of Passover, when you bring that Omer offering. What should you count? 7 weeks they shall be complete. Okay? So this is called Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. The Omer is actually an amount. I mentioned before, the Omer is literally referring to a volume. It's like of food. And the Torah says not only do we bring it, and not only on the second day of Passover, not only does that trigger the allowance. Look at verse 16. "You shall count until the day after the 7th week, which is the 50th day, on which you shall bring a new meal offering to the Lord." So count 7 weeks, 49 days. And the day after, day number 50, is now a new offering. And now we bring a new meal offering to the Lord. What is the meal offering, you might wonder? That is an offering of not barley, but wheat. Now we bring wheat. We've progressed. We started off with barley, which is lower grade food. And now 7 weeks later, we're upgrading our offering to the new meal offering. This is now the wheat offering. And how do we do this? Verse 17, "From your dwelling places you shall bring bread, set aside 2 loaves, made from 2/10 of an ephah, fine flour, baked leavened." All right, fine. When is this brought, by the way? It's very subtle here. It's very subtle. What's this 50th day called? We call it the holiday of Shavuot. That's the holiday of Shavuot. right? That's when we celebrate the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. That's when the Torah was given. 50 days after Passover. That's when it happened. But there's no mention of that here. There's a mention, and it's only in the context of bringing another offering, another grain offering, 50 days later. Okay. So I want to share with you an insight, a deeper insight into the nature of this counting of the Omer time period, the significance of 49 days, the significance of the 50th day, and the significance of progressing from barley to wheat. Let's jump right in. So what is 49? In math, or whatever, numbers, 7 times 7. What's 7? What's the significance of 7? So the Kabbalah tells us, and for those of you that have studied Kabbalah before, so you might be familiar with this, Kabbalah speaks of 7 primary emotive characteristics, character traits. 7 midot, 7 primary emotions or character traits. 7 times 7. Why 7 times 7? Each one of the character traits has within it a shade or an inflection of each of the other. Imagine colors. Imagine you have a palette, imagine you're painting something and you have 7 colors. You have red, blue, green, yellow, orange. I'll let you come up with the colors, right? Imagine you have 7 colors, right? And then you take, so 7 distinct colors, but then you take a little bit of another color, let's say a blue, right? You have blue. What do? Yeah, it's like an indigo blue. Now you take your brush, you dip it in a little bit of white, and then you pick up the blue, and then you paint. Guess what's going to happen? Your blue is going to become a lighter shade because you've mixed 2 colors together. It's the same thing with the sphirot. And by the way, if you mix, so with blue you can mix. It would be good if I had all the colors straight in my head. Whatever. But with any given paint color, you can mix the other 6, or stick with the pure, blue of blue, right? So you have 7 possibilities within each color. There's pure blue, that's the blue of blue. You have white and blue, green and blue, orange and blue, red and blue, right? The black and blue, etc. 7 times 7 is 49. When you have 7 colors, right, there are 49 possibilities. Now that's if you only mix 1 and 1. You can pick up 2 colors and mix it in a third, and then all bets are up. But if you're only mixing 1 into 1, you have 49 color possibilities. The same thing is true when it comes to our midot, our characteristics. So the 49 days, our tradition tells us, are days in which the counting of the Omer, this time period, although we don't have a temple and we don't bring this offering, we still count the Omer. Right? It's still a mitzvah to count this time. If we didn't bring the offering, we're still counting the Omer. We still count up 49 days, and the 50th day is the holiday of Shavuot. And during this time period, our tradition tells us that we're meant to work on refining our character. We're meant to become more of a mensch, more of a refined human being. So we work on our 7 emotions, not the colors. We're not working on blue. We're working on chesed, kindness, generosity. We're working on giving. Chesed of chesed is pure giving. Gevura within chesed is giving with measure. Tiferet of chesed means giving with compassion. Netzach of chesed means giving with fortitude. Right? We'll make sure that we're giving even when obstacles get in our way. Hod of chesed means giving with humility and decency. Yesod of chesed means giving with and maintaining a connection with the recipient. And Malchus of chesed means giving and being a role model for others, like a leader, like a melech, like a king, being a role model for others to give. So within this one chesed, within this one area of giving, you have 7 types of giving. And so this is what we work on throughout these 49 days. We work on all of our characteristics, all of our character attributes to become, simply said, more refined, better people, better human beings. More kind, more generous, more aligned with purpose, more thoughtful, more mindful, better human beings. So that's what's going on. When we count 49 days, when we perfect ourselves to the best of our ability, when we refine ourselves throughout this time period that we're in right now, actually, today, if you're counting, right, today is day number 27. So we're a little bit more than halfway through the count. Today is 27 days of the Omer. So after we work on ourselves for these 49 days, then we're ready to receive the Torah. Day number 50, we're ready to get the Torah. It's the ultimate prep, right? If we want to receive the Torah, once again, the anniversary of the Torah experience at Sinai happens on Shavuot, 50 days after Passover. So now's the time to get ready. And that's also why we progress from barley to wheat. Why? The Talmud tells us that barley was mainly used back in the day as an animal food, whereas wheat is primarily used as human food. So if you're feeding your animals, you would give them barley. But for human beings, typically bread, wheat, right, flour from wheat, it's typically a wheat sustenance. What's the message? We're moving from our animalistic tendencies, the barley offering, and 50 days later, we're now ready to bring the wheat offering, which is the human offering. Not human offering. No, sorry. Let me take that back. The human food, right? We're working on our animal instincts to become more of a mensch. A mensch means a human being. It's funny. It's funny because language is so interesting. You know, the same word that means something in Hebrew or Yiddish means something completely in English. Like when we say in our culture here in America, listen, I'm only human. When do we typically say that? When we're not acting like a mensch. Like I'm only human. Like, what do you expect? Whereas in Judaism we say, what do you mean only human? You're human, right? To be a mensch is the high standard. We don't say I'm only a mensch. Like that's a weird expression. No one ever said that, right? A mensch, a human being, means that there's a standard that you're living by. It means that you're honest. It means you have integrity. It means that you're in control of your instincts, of your animalistic instincts, right? So we don't say, oh, I'm only human or they're only human. We don't say that in the Jewish vernacular. We use human as the standard that we're striving toward, not as the excuse that we're giving ourselves to get out of trouble. Whereas in America, for some reason, we associate being only human with an excuse to do all sorts of things and to give in to our lower tendencies. I don't know why it's like that toward Sinai, climbing the mountain to be ready to get the Torah. Okay, that is that conversation. Want to mention one more thing for today, and that is verse 22. This talks about something very important, extremely important. It's the farmer's obligation to take care of the poor. If you owned the farm in the ancient land of Israel, you had to leave some food for those that didn't have food. Take a look at verse 22. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not completely remove the corner of your field during your harvesting. We're talking about harvesting now. It's harvesting season. It's the springtime, right? So here's a relevant law. Do not completely remove the corner of the field. And you shall not gather up the gleanings of your harvest. Rather, you shall leave. That means like stuff that is left behind or forgotten or that falls down. Don't pick it up. Leave it. Rather, you shall leave these for the poor person and for the stranger. Somebody who does not have food. Somebody who is struggling with finances. Somebody who doesn't have their own property, their own field, their own ability to grow food. It becomes a responsibility. Torah says you are not only responsible for yourself and your family, you're responsible for the other person. But why? It's on them. I don't have to worry about them. Let them worry about them. Torah says no. It's not moral. It's not okay. It's not kosher. If you have a field, you have to leave part of the field for the other guy. How much is the corner? It says leave the corner of your field. Don't remove. Don't harvest the corner. Leave the edges. How much are the edges? There's no set amount. There's no set amount. The message is be as generous as you can, and then maybe a little bit more. Right? Be generous. It's such a beautiful idea. You know, people ask like, what's the economic model of Torah? And I don't know if Torah specifically fits in a box, but I would say it's along the lines of compassionate capitalism. There's no prohibition against owning land. Like the Torah doesn't say you can own land, but you should know it really belongs to the government. It's not socialism, right? Torah is not a socialistic economic model. It's you own your own land and you have your own food. Grow your own food. Like do your own thing, no problem. But there is embedded laws that tell us how we're meant to act. You can't just keep everything for yourself. It's your field, yes, but don't keep it all for yourself. Leave some for the poor. Leave some for the stranger among you who doesn't have land. Leave some, the corners, the stuff that you left, the stuff that you forgot, the stuff that dropped. Leave it. Be generous. Be giving. King David once asked God, why are there poor people? God, can't you fix this can't you fix the poverty issue? Can't you solve it? You're God. Find a way to get everybody what they need. You know what God told King Solomon? He said, I could do that, but that would take away from your mitzvah. In other words, that would take away from human compassion. If everything was given to everybody, then no one would be givers to others, because we would all have what we need. We wouldn't need anyone else. And that would rob us of a gift that we have, the opportunity to give. I'm sure somebody who doesn't have, right? Maybe this is not the most comforting message, right? I mean, like, I'd rather have than somebody else be able to practice, being kind. But at the end of the day, this is God's model. The message for us, if we have, is that we should be generous with what we have. And we should look. So my pledge is, Peachtree, it's all about full circle, right? It's all about the callback. I'm going to leave the edges of my Peachtree to those that want, to those that need. I'm kidding, or not kidding. I'm sure I can't reach all of them anyway. But as I mentioned in the past, in previous sessions over the last few days, we pick them and we leave them, and they're starting to ripen. By the way, I haven't left them yet. I have a table on my porch. I've left a few on the table to see what's going on with them. They're very good. They're getting soft. They smell amazing. I'm not like, this is not a plug about the peach tree specifically. It's not like this was where we were headed toward. But now that we're here, I'm not so. Anyway, it's good that we're here also. The point is, let's be generous with what we have, with our blessings. Let's appreciate every gift that we have and recognize that we're always given a little bit extra, a little bit more that we can then share with others. All right, so to recap today's discussion, let's go back to the beginning and recap very quickly. We talked about the holidays, and the first holiday is Shabbat. We have a weekly holiday. Let's not take it for granted. It's such a special day. It's a holiday. It's a mini holiday every single week. We got vacation day. It's amazing. That was message number one. Message number two was about the counting of the Emor. And we talked about how when we count 49 days, and the 50th day is a second offering, is the holiday of Shavuot. We spoke about the counting on a deeper level, which is about personal character refinement and spiritual alignment, getting ourselves ready for Shavuot, working on our 7 character traits. We spoke about how that is the progression from animal to human, from being instinctual to being a mensch. That's where we're going. And when we're a mensch, now we're ready to embrace the Torah and Torah's expectations of us. And the last thing I mentioned was, I think we had a few other points, but last thing we mentioned was about being generous with our land. It's your land, it's your field, you plowed it, you planted it, you harvested, you took care of it. Listen, you rode the tractors or the oxen, you did all the work. And it's really, it could be yours. The Torah says, leave some for the other. Be kind. Right? Remember Blockbuster video? Be kind, rewind. Torah says it's not about rewind. Right? Who rewinds anyway in the age of Netflix and Hulu and other sorts of services, right? No rewinding. So now we don't have to rewind to be kind. Now be kind, give. Be kind, make your blessing a blessing for the next person. Let's share our blessings, let's share our gifts. It's not only our food, it's not only our money, it's also our time and our love and our concern. All right, thank you all. I appreciate the time that you share with me today and that we had a chance to share together. Feel free to unmute yourselves to ask any questions, share any thoughts, or just to say hi.